Sunny glanced at Mordred in displeasure. Now, even he was starting to feel a little uneasy at the mention of Asterion. He was also a little stunned. The idea of a human who considered himself a spawn of nightmare had never crossed his mind. Even more disturbing was the fact that Asterion had an actual claim to such a title. Mordred chuckled. It is not that surprising if you think about it. What is a human, after all? There are some common traits we all share, like having 2 hands and 2 feet, being featherless bipeds. However, does a saint cease to be a human when they assume their transcendent form? Hardly. In truth, we also share more profound things. Our way of thinking, culture, values, our birthplace. He sighed. But that man was born in a different world, and raised by people who had quite a peculiar culture and values. More than that, he was unique even among them, the first of his kind. The first human child born in the dream realm, the first dream spawn. He only encountered human civilization after becoming awakened. So, it's not that hard to imagine that he would consider himself a stranger to our merry band. Oh, and I am using our figuratively. In truth, I feel somewhat like a stranger to mankind myself. Sunny offered him a half-hearted smile. So what you are telling me is that while Nephice is a dream spawn, that man is better described as a nightmare spawn. Mordred shrugged. A dream spawn, a nightmare spawn, is there really a difference? In the world we live in, the two are one and the same. Sunny pursed his lips. There is a difference. Names have a power, you know. Regardless, I am more interested in something else. That man, whatever we call him, is he actually corrupted? Mordred hesitated for a while. I am not quite sure. These dream spawns are all paradoxical creatures, you know. I do not think that he is truly corrupted. I believe that he is still walking the path of ascension. However, who can tell? He might be a human who is walking the path of corruption, or a corrupted man who is walking the path of ascension. Or maybe there is no difference between the two for him at all. He grinned. If I knew that much about the dream spawn, I wouldn't be here, desperately trying to prepare for his return. I can tell you one thing, though. Mordred glanced at Sunny with a smile. Of all the people in both worlds, I am the one who knows the most about him. So, coming back to the question that provoked this unpleasant conversation, the reason neither you nor Changing Star can afford to kill me is that I am your best ally in the fight against the dream spawn. That soured Sunny's mood quite a lot. He was feverishly digesting the new information about Asterion. Sunny had known that the third sovereign would become a problem sooner or later, however, after hearing Mordred out, he was inclined to believe the bastard. The problem would arrive sooner rather than later. And the danger posed by Asterion was perhaps even greater than Sunny, Nephice, and Cassie had anticipated. Worse of all, no matter how much Sunny was revolted by the idea, he could not deny Mordred's last statement. They could not afford to exterminate their best source of information about Asterion, at least not just yet. Killing Mordred would be a mistake, despite how much of a loose cannon he was and all the terrible crimes he had committed. They could make him answer for those after Asterion had been dealt with, regardless. On top of that, Sunny was still not entirely comfortable with the idea of killing the other Mordred in cold blood just to get rid of this one. That guy was innocent, having done nothing wrong, nothing to justify an execution, anyway. Sunny had killed plenty of people in his life, and was not above doing what had to be done in order to achieve his goals. But he was not entirely callous either, so, he felt undecided on what to do with the other Mordred. And that, without a doubt, was another fact Mordred was counting on. That slippery bastard. Sunny glanced at the Prince of Nothing somberly. I might, just might, consider keeping you alive. However, you should think about giving me a taste of what you are offering, to help me make the decision. What powers does Asterion possess? What is his aspect? What is his flaw? Why is he searching for divine lineages? And so on. Mordred laughed. So many questions. He lingered for a while, then spoke in a distant tone, as if musing aloud. Let's not mention his ability to manipulate and compel living beings, as well as to know things that are not supposed to be known. That is his aspect, at least I suspect that it is, but not his nature. His nature, meanwhile. Mordred frowned faintly. The dream spawn bears the lineage of the most elusive of the gods, heart god, the god of souls, as well as emotions, memory, growth, and hunger. So, he wields an eerie power to consume and assimilate things. That is what makes him a monster. He is a chimera. Sunny blinked a few times. Wait, you don't mean that? Mordred nodded. Yes. It is not supposed to be possible, just like the existence of beings who are both divine and profane is not supposed to be possible, but the dream spawn is capable of bearing several lineages at the same time. He inherited the lineage of heart god from his parents, he assimilated the lineage of war god from my blood. He received the lineage of beast god from Kisong, and plundered the lineage of storm god from Nightwalker. He chuckled. He kept Nephi's of immortal flame alive because he needed her to grow up and awaken to steal the lineage of sun god. And he has waited for a long, long time for the lineage of shadow god to finally reveal itself. For you to reveal yourself. So, now that all he seeks is within reach, he will inevitably come for the two of you, to finish his collection and absorb all 6 divine lineages. What for? That, I do not know. Mordred glanced at Sunny and raised an eyebrow. How's that for a taste? Ah, am I not a generous and benevolent person? Look, I turned a new leaf. That is the second time I shared valuable information with you for free. Sunny remained silent for a long while. The good thing is that my incarnations can sense what is happening in Mirage City. So, they'll be relaying this information to Nephi and Cassie immediately. After a while, he sighed. Fine. Let's strike a deal, you and I. What do you want in exchange for acting as bait to lure the Castellan out, and helping us deal with the dream spawn in the future? Mordred shrugged. It is as I said. I want safety. Ensure the survival of my pathetic other self, put him in a place more secure than the Palace of Imagination. The safest place in both worlds, settle him on the Ivory Island, and guard him as fervently as you guard each other, both from the dream spawn and from Morgan. Actually, from anything that can harm him even a little bit. Sunny tilted his head a little. You want us, Nephi's, Cassie, and me, to become roommates with your other self? That is your price? Mordred smiled pleasantly. Quite aptly put. Yes, at least until the dream spawn is dealt with. I know, cohabitating with that worm is an unpleasant prospect, but please bear with him for a while. Sunny frowned. He wasn't sure that Mordred was being sincere, in fact, he was quite certain that the bastard was deceiving him, somehow. But there was one thing Sunny knew for sure. It was that Mordred absolutely detested Asterion. A long time ago, the Prince of Nothing had shared his intentions with him. He had wanted revenge against the dream spawn almost as much as he wanted to avenge himself on Valor. That made his motives at least a little bit believable. In fact, he is giving us a hostage. What would that lunatic be able to do if his very death was in their hands? Nothing. Sunny glanced at Mordred somberly for a long while, then sighed. It's a deal. Some time prior, Effie returned home, the home of her counterpart, which felt both familiar and strange. It was different from her own family home in Bastion, but shared the same feeling of coziness with it. The nature of life in Mirage City was vastly different from the real world, of course, but Effie vaguely remembered how her counterpart had lived, which was why she did not feel particularly alien to this fantastical place. If anything, she felt a little bit too at home here. The people quietly following her in the shadows were troublesome. It was the people inside, however, who were the problem. Opening the door, Effie took off her coat and shook off the drops of water from her hair. By the time she was done with that, the sound of little feet drumming excitedly on the floor was already drawing near. Mommy. She put on a smile. Her children, her counterpart's children, were upon her a moment later. She crouched to hug them, burying her face in their soft hair. Mommy's home. Mama. It was raining a lot, Mama. The boy was a little older, while the little girl was still a toddler. He was boisterous, while she was shy. Both of them were full of the irresistible, innocent sweetness that only children possessed. Neither of them was real. Effie kept reminding herself of that fact, but it was of no use. Cold rationality was powerless in the face of blazing emotions, and it was especially powerless in the face of those fundamental feelings that lay at the foundation of human nature. Like the affection a mother felt for her children. Despite only knowing them for a few days, she did not want to let these kids go. She couldn't. Hey, you rascals. Your mom had a very long day. Give me a minute to catch my breath. The kids reluctantly let go of her and took a couple of steps back. The girl glanced up at her with wide eyes, which suddenly started to water for no good reason. Oh. Mama, did you get an ouchie? Effie glanced down at herself. She had been in pretty bad shape after the car crash, but most of her bruises and contusions were out of view. There were a few scrapes on her arms and face, though, covered by adhesive bandage. She smiled and patted her daughter's head. Yes, but just a tiny one. Then, she winked at the little girl. Mama is too awesome to get really hurt, pumpkin. The boy clenched his fists. Our mom is the awesomest mom in the world. Of course she won't get hurt. Effie laughed. All right, settle down. Let's prepare you for bed. The kids protested in unison. No. I want ice cream first. I want to watch cartoons. She let out a theatrical sigh. No ice cream before bed. Where did this idea even come from? Cartoons are negotiable, though. Soon enough, Effie found herself on the sofa with two soft bodies pressed against her, hugging the kids gently as they watched a colorful cartoon with enthralled expressions. Look. It's Tolly. Go get them, Tolly. On the screen, a pair of precocious kids somehow got themselves into trouble with a band of clumsy bandits while trying to obtain ice cream from a magical ice cream stand. At the last moment, the owner of the stand, a pink dragon named Tolly, revealed herself to save the day. She dealt with the bandits, huffed and puffed until they ran away to surrender themselves to the police, and then treated the kids to waffle cones full of delicious ice cream. Ah, I want ice cream too. Tolly is the best. The name of this popular cartoon was, apparently, Talitha's Ice Cream. The titular Talitha, strangely enough, resembled a young awakened girl Effie had met in Bastion once or twice, one of the Shadow Clan members operating there in secret. Considering that everyone in Mirage City was based on reflections from outside the Great Mirror, that wasn't too peculiar. Effie did not know why that girl's reflection turned out to be a pink dragon, though. That was a mystery. Ah. I want ice cream, too. She smiled and hugged her kids tighter. Then, her expression froze. What am I doing? These children were not hers. But even if they were. Tonight, she was going to say goodbye to them. Forever. Effie was going to leave and never return. She was going to face the Castellan and challenge it for control of the Palace of Imagination. If she lost, she would die. Detective Athena of the Mirage City Police Department would die, too, leaving these sweet kids to grow up without a mother. If she won, Mirage City would very likely cease to exist, and these innocent children would cease to exist with it. In any case, she would never see them again. There was suddenly a dull ache in Effie's chest. She remained motionless for a while, and then let out a quiet sigh. They're not real. Soon enough, the cartoon was over. She prepared the pair of children for bed, and then lingered in their room, looking at them quietly. Mom. Dad said that you won't have to go to work for a while. Let's go to the zoo tomorrow. Let's go to the park. Let's go to the movies. Effie smiled gently. That sounds nice. The boy seemed way too excited to fall asleep anytime soon. Let's go to the lake. Let's go to the toy store. Ooh, they are opening the castle soon, let's go to the castle. Effie's smile dimmed a little. That sounds nice, too. Some time later, she turned off the lamps and put on the night light for the children. Then, Effie made to leave. But at the last moment, a tiny hand caught her sleeve. Glancing down, she saw the little girl looking at her with pitiful eyes. Mama, don't go. Effie let out a small sigh. Kneeling in front of the girl's bed, she tucked her in and said softly. Mama has to go, pumpkin. Sleep tight. When you open your eyes. She paused and remained silent for a while. Then, she forced out a smile. Daddy will make you a delicious breakfast. He will take you to the zoo, to the park, and to the movies. He will even buy you ice cream. The girl's eyes glistened. What about you, Mama? Will Daddy buy ice cream for you, too? Effie chuckled. Why, of course. How can I leave them? She glanced at the little girl intently, as if wanting to etch her lovely image into her memory. If someone asked Effie to describe what she felt at that moment, she would not have been able to. But it was then that she finally understood what she was missing, what stood in her way on the path of ascension. Kai's greatest obstacle had been his lack of confidence. But Effie was different. What held her back the most was her inability to let go. The very reason she wanted to become stronger was to protect the things she cherished. But if she wanted to protect them, she had to let go. She had to learn how to leave them behind. How twisted. Patting the little girl on the head, Effie leaned down and whispered. Mommy loves you very much. She was saying it for Detective Athena, who could not say it herself, and for her own sake, as well. Deep at night, when the entire house slept soundly, Effie crept to the window and opened it without making a sound. Throwing one last look back, she closed her eyes for a second and inhaled the smells of the strange, cozy home. Then, her expression hardened. She smiled bitterly and turned away. A moment later, she was gone, leaving behind only the scent of rain. It was at the crack of dawn that Sunny finally reached the abandoned church. The city was still enveloped in deep darkness, though, due to the heavy storm clouds obscuring the sky. The torrential rain continued to pour down. The flooding in various parts of the city was only growing worse, the roads were a mess, and the silence of the dying night was kept at bay by the blaring of car horns. Looking at the many PTVs stuck in the slowly rising water, Sunny could not help but expect them to start blowing up in a devastating chain reaction. However, none of them did. Despite the strange nature of their engines and fuel, the ancient vehicles were not at all as prone to exploding as he had expected. Parking his newly acquired PTV in front of the church, Sunny climbed out and walked in. Effie arrived first. It seemed, both of them had long escaped the surveillance team sent to spy on them, but Sunny ran a few errands before returning to their temporary lair. Hey, partner, Effie met him with a wave. Her usually bright and boisterous smile seemed faint and subdued today, and there was a hint of wistful melancholy in her eyes. Sunny frowned slightly and stopped near her. Are you all right? Effie chuckled. Me? Oh, well, yes. Sure I am. When have I ever not been all right? He studied her for a few moments, knowing that she was not telling the truth. But he also knew that she did not want to talk about what was bothering her. At least not with him, who was still mostly a stranger. So, Sunny simply respected her wishes, even if it hurt. He smiled derisively. You're just bummed out because you'll never get the chance to gobble up an entire box of those donut thingies, right? Effie's smile widened, turning at least a little bit sincere. Damn. You know me so well. I haven't even thought about that. He scoffed, then walked past her. The other Mordred was napping on one of the benches. Morgan was keeping an eye on him from behind the altar. Saint was sitting apart from everyone, staring into the distance. Sunny contemplated for a few moments, then walked over to Morgan first. She briefly informed him about what they had learned from the other Mordred while he explained to her who was behind the attempts on their lives. The knowledge of what Mordred's flaw actually was rendered Sunny speechless for a while, but eventually, he gave Morgan a slow nod. Strangely enough, it made sense for Mordred to be a a broken mirror of himself, each shard reflecting the visage of the original person from a different angle. Sunny looked at Morgan, then asked. So, this version of your brother, is he really as nice as he seems? Is he actually a sane person? She looked in the direction where the other Mordred slept and remained silent for a long while. Her usually cold expression seemed troubled, somehow. Eventually, Morgan shook her head slightly and sighed. He is indeed just what he seems, nice, decent, compassionate. But a sane person? No, he is not sane. In fact, I am not even sure that he can be called a person. If anything, I'd say that he is even more damaged than the one we know. Sunny raised an eyebrow. More crazy than that psychopath? How so? Morgan smiled faintly. The Mordred from the real world cannot feel regret, which twisted him into the monster we know today. But this one cannot feel other things, anger, resentment, hatred, contempt, and much more. Oddly enough, or perhaps quite predictably, that makes him much less of a complete person than the other one is. He is a cripple. She paused for a moment. He has no negative feelings toward the one who imprisoned him in this illusion whatsoever, despite all the suffering he endured here. He might feel sad about the death of his driver, who had served his family for decades, but he is incapable of resenting the person who killed him. And if we tell him that the one who wants to kill him is his own uncle, he would not be able to feel hurt by that betrayal, not really. It is as if his soul was neutered. Morgan shook her head with a wistful expression. So, yes, he is nice. He is smart, affectionate, and pleasant. But he is not mentally sound. Not at all. I guess, he is what remains of a person when their very being gets shattered into pieces. She looked at Sunny and smiled darkly. And if you ask me, crazy as it may sound, I would have preferred to be the murderous one instead of a harmless one. Sunny stared back at her silently. What a surprise. So would I. A person would probably become a monster if they were not capable of feeling regret, but what would they become if they were incapable of feeling anger? That wasn't something he ever wanted to experience, or could allow himself to lose. Sunny had gotten this far due to various reasons, but for a long stretch of it all, he had only survived out of spite. If his ability to feel the darker shades of human emotions was taken away from him, he would not have lived for long. He would not have been able to truly experience the brighter, stunning feelings humans felt, either. It is a bit sad. No matter how sad it was, though, there was a different aspect of Mordred's flaw to consider. He looked quietly at the sleeping CEO of the Valor Group. According to Morgan, when one fragment of Mordred killed another, the destroyed fragment was absorbed. That was what the Mordred they knew had done to 5 of his mirror versions. And the other Mordred, despite all of it, was indeed harmless. That presented a potential way to remove the danger Mordred posed without robbing humanity of one of its most fearsome scions. The Prince of Nothing could not kill his other self, because that last piece of him he had not absorbed yet contained his death. But what would happen if the other Mordred killed the Prince of Nothing? Then, they would become an actual person. A complete individual capable of feeling everything that a human being was supposed to feel, and therefore not at all as unhinged as the Prince of Nothing was. And that would give Sunny and Nephi's a chance to recruit an ally who was both immensely powerful and potentially reliable, which was an incredible boon, especially considering the looming threat of Asterion. It is worth considering, is it not? Sunny remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. Whether it was or wasn't worth it did not matter, because it was hardly possible, precisely because of what the other Mordred was. He was indeed overly nice, kind, and compassionate, which meant that he would never kill his other self, no matter what the Prince of Nothing had done in the past. One could not kill the other without destroying himself, while the other could not kill anyone, really, let alone his last mirror sibling. Therefore, Mordred was destined to remain fragmented forever. A flaw is a flaw, how gruesomely apartment. Sunny sighed, then looked at Morgan and said in a neutral tone. In any case, go wake him up. We should start preparing to depart, so, get ready. Everything will be decided today. When Morgan walked past him, Sunny inhaled deeply and looked at Saint. Now, for the hardest part. He had to convince Dr. Saint to lend them a hand in the fight against the Castellan, somehow. Dr. Saint. Sunny had to repeat her name twice before she turned and regarded him with a distant, aloof gaze. He hesitated for a few seconds, then sat down next to her. I guess I have some good news and some bad news for you. Saint simply watched him without saying anything. He could not read anything from her expression, either, so, despite the fact that she looked quite like a human at the moment, he suddenly felt like he was talking to his familiar shadow. That comforted him a little. The good news is that I found out who was trying to kill us. The bad news is that arresting him, let alone prosecuting him, will pose a problem. Half of the city is in his pocket, after all. And we don't have time to do it by the book, either. She raised her eyebrows slightly, prompting Sunny to smile. You're right. I do not have the authority to arrest anyone anymore, anyway. But you know what my counterpart, the devil detective, would say. We have to try regardless. That person has committed too many crimes to walk free. The victims of the nihilist and all the other people he hurt or ruined demand justice. Me personally, though? I do not care about justice too much. He inhaled deeply. However, I have my own reasons to want to deal with the mastermind behind all these deaths. Doing so will be my ticket home, and yours, too. Among other things. So, I want to ask a favor from you. That guy will not go down without a fight. Please, help me bring him down. I need you. Sunny chuckled. Like always. It strikes me that I would not be alive if not for your silent presence over all these years. In fact, I would have died 10 times over. Hell, you even taught me how to properly wield a sword, and as a sign of gratitude, I dragged you on a series of increasingly macabre adventures through the depths of increasingly dreadful hells. Sorry, Saint, you got a very troublesome, very needy liege. He remained silent for a while, looking down, then added. In any case, I doubt that we will have a conversation like this after escaping the palace of imagination. So, using this chance, I just wanted to say, thank you, Saint. For everything. Even if I somehow managed to find a way to survive without you, it would not have been half as fun. She studied him for a long while without saying anything, then looked away. After a long stretch of silence, Saint let out a quiet sigh and asked. So, in that supposedly real world, did you mention that I serve you? I am a servant? Sunny coughed. Well, no? Not exactly. I am the Lord of Shadows, and you are one of my shadows, the very first shadow I created, actually. It is the nature of a shadow to be cast by someone, and in your case, I guess you are cast by me. You are not a servant, though. More of a champion, a companion, and the general of my legion. He looked at the beautiful windows of the church and smiled. We met on the streets of the dark city, where you killed a couple of abominations of a higher rank and class than you, all alone. Then, we traveled across the deadly reaches of the Forgotten Shore together, besieged the Crimson Spire, explored the Chained Isles and endured the crushing side by side, survived the madness of the Kingdom of Hope, fought a losing war in Antarctica and defended Falcon Scott until the bitter end, ventured into the harrowing darkness of the Tomb of Ariel and sailed the great river of time, crossed the Hollow Mountains and reached the end of the world, fought a bloody war against the Sovereigns. On the corpse of a dead god. Sunny chuckled. Goodness gracious. Now that I list all these things aloud, it sounds like quite an intense decade. Saint shifted slightly, then raised her hand. A torrent of inky darkness escaped from beneath her skin, swirling around her wrist before forming into a black blade for a moment. I don't recall. Sunny sighed. He still did not know why Saint seemed to be incapable of remembering who she was. It was funny, but despite being the Lord of Shadows, he did not know a lot about the nature of his shadows. He did not really know how they thought, how they felt, what motivated them, what their goals and desires were, or if they even had any. He had only ever caught small glimpses of how they existed while augmenting them. Sunny knew, for example, that Saint vaguely remembered her original self. However, those memories were distant and obscure, like a half-forgotten dream. Perhaps that was a mercy. After all, what would become of Saint if she could remember her previous life? That life contained thousands of years of corruption, after all. Remembering it would not only be a torment, but could very well drive her insane, or worse still, infect her with the seeds of nightmare all over again. Maybe that was why she could not remember herself here, in Mirage City. Or maybe it was because Saint was quite like Mordred, a semblance of a person, but not really a complete being. Even her name was not really a name, but simply what her people had been called. Nameless and cast by a fateless master, how could she remember her true self? Yuri's had once told Sunny that his shadows could be completed, somehow, but if there was a way, Sunny had not found it yet. He rubbed his face. Still, even if you don't remember, I'll do it. He froze, then looked at Saint with wide eyes. Excuse me? She turned to him with the usual impassive expression. I'll help you bring down the mastermind, whoever he is. You can count on me. Like always. Sunny studied her for a bit. Just like that? Before he knew it, a relieved sigh escaped from his lips. Good. That's good. This is great news, actually. Thank you. He paused for a few moments, and then asked. But may I ask why? Saint remained silent for a long while, contemplating. It seemed like she was carefully choosing the right words. But in the end, she simply smiled. I don't know. I must have gone mad. Sunny stared at her, dumbstruck. Seeing Saint smile was truly a breathtaking sight. Finally, they gathered around the altar. Sunny, Effie, Morgan, Saint, and the other Mordred, who had woken up from his peaceful nap. The four of them glanced somber and apprehensive, while the CEO of the Valor Group looked carefree and full of curiosity. Good morning, Detective Sunless. How was your night? Sunny stared at him for a few seconds, then sighed. Eventful. He looked at each of his companions in turn, and then spoke calmly. As I already mentioned, the culprit behind the nihilist killings and the attempts on our lives is none other than the chairman of the Valor Group board, Maddock. He perpetrated these crimes in an attempt to cover up his poor handling of the Northern Dam renovation project. Saying this, Sunny looked at the other Mordred. Just as Morgan had said, he did not look particularly hurt by the fact that his own uncle was trying to kill him. Mordred's expression remained relaxed and unblemished, and the slight smile playing on his lips did not falter. He did look a little concerned, though. Northern Dam renovation, that is just bad business. Terrible optics, as well. I simply do not understand what Uncle was thinking. Of all the things. Morgan had mentioned that the guy was harmless, but she had not mentioned that he was hopeless. At least he's honest. Shaking his head, Sunny continued. I struck a deal with Mordred, the mean Mordred, to pose as the Valor CEO and draw Maddock out. They agreed to meet face to face and talk. Maddock chose the location, it is the castle. So, that is where we need to go. Morgan raised an eyebrow. It is bound to be a trap, a death trap. You know that the other playing the role of our uncle will bring an army of henchmen to make sure that Mordred does not walk out of their meeting alive. Sunny smiled. Naturally. It's going to be a real mess, I'm counting on it. Turning away, he headed to the doors. Follow me. They exited the abandoned church and approached the PTV he had arrived on. While Sunny was trying to remember how to open a trunk, Effie blinked a couple of times. Wait, where did you get a car? And this one is much better than yours was, too. Sunny scowled, offended on behalf of his destroyed PTV. First of all, it's not better. It just looks nicer. And second of all, I paid a visit to our friends from the Black Snake gang after finishing up with Mordred and had a good talk with them. He smiled. Let's just say that those gangsters felt inclined to give me some protection money. And that money came in the form of this vehicle, as well as what's in its trunk. The trunk finally opened, and Sunny pointed inside with a proud look. Effie whistled. Wow. Inside were all the tools one would need to storm the lair of a criminal mastermind. Tactical gear, bulletproof vests, boxes of bullets, guns. Effie looked at them with a confused expression. Where did they even get all this stuff? Handing her a bulletproof vest, Sunny pointed to the letters on its front. Where else? They bought it from the cops. It was a funny situation, really. The criminals had purchased illegal equipment from dirty cops, and then he extorted them for said equipment, receiving it as a bribe to leave them alone. It was like a cycle of corruption. In any case, the castle will most likely be heavily defended. We will sneak inside. If that doesn't work, we will storm it, take out Maddox's henchmen, and then deal with Maddox himself. Once he is rendered useless, the Castellan will be forced to reveal its hand. That is when we will help Effie reach it, destroy it, and reclaim her authority as the master of the castle. Morgan frowned. Hold your horses. How are we supposed to take out a small army of private security specialists? They will be armed, as well, and we are currently mundane. One bullet will be all it takes to kill us. Sunny smiled. Maddox might have an army of henchmen, but we have Saint. He pointed to his taciturn psychiatrist, who was looking at the firearms with an uninterested expression. As far as we know, she is the only being in Mirage City capable of wielding awakened powers. She is far away from reclaiming her transcendent might, but even then, one of her should be enough to balance the scales. Saint gave him a sideways look and did not say anything. Morgan, meanwhile, looked at the other Mordred. What about him? Where are we going to stash him? Sunny shook his head. Nowhere in Mirage City is safe. Not only because the Castellan is now hunting him down in an attempt to make your fratricide fantasy come true, but also because the northern dam is compromised. There is no telling when it will collapse, and what the result will be. He offered the other Mordred a dark smile. So, we'll be taking him with us. Naturally, Mr. Mordred here is not exactly a seasoned fighter. Sunny turned to Morgan. So, it is going to be your job to keep him safe. She blinked a couple of times. Mine? Why me? Have you forgotten why I? She did not say the rest, but he understood. Morgan had come to the Palace of Imagination to kill the other Mordred, so she was understandably surprised that Sunny was entrusting her brother's safety to her. But it was the very fact that she seemed reluctant to admit her goal in front of the other Mordred that affirmed his decision. He shrugged. Because his survival is paramount, and after Saint, you are the strongest among us due to your flaw. Plus, you are his sister. He'll be more comfortable with you, and less likely to do something foolish. Morgan looked at him in displeasure for a while, then scoffed and looked away. Don't regret your decision later, Lord Shadow. Sunny looked at her and grinned. Hey. Don't pout. Isn't it fun? The last time, you were defending the castle from Mordred, now, you'll be the one besieging it with him. It's like the full experience. Morgan pierced him with a scathing gaze. I do not pout. Her voice sounded cold enough to freeze the falling rain. Sunny cleared his throat. Well, in any case, arm yourselves and get into the PTV. He looked up and inhaled the alien air of Mirage City with a full chest. What would the devil detective say? Sunny smiled darkly. It is time to dish out some justice.